Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet Joe Biden on Thursday, Donald Trump on Friday. Can you talk to us about how important the US election is in terms of its relationship with Israel?
So I think he's also meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris on Thursday, which I think is critically important. Now, I do note that she was not in the chamber during the speech a couple of hours ago. Some have interpreted that as a slight against Prime Minister Netanyahu, but I'll allow everyone else to come to their conclusions. He is going to meet with her and with President Biden. So before I get on to Trump, just a quick word about what we can expect if there is a smooth transition from President Biden to Vice President Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee. President Biden has had a decades-long association and relationship with the state of Israel. It is very, very strong. It is rather unwavering, and he, on a personal level, as well as one of the longest-serving senators and also public figures in American political history, he has a very, very personal and strong connection to the state of Israel. Kamala Harris's connection is less than that of President Biden, and I do believe that will play a role. Now, whether minor or major, I don't know, and only time will tell. My assumption is that she will try and toe the line of the previous 3.5 years of the administration, and you won't see a massive departure on policy vis-a-vis Israel. However, I do have my concerns that the lacking of that personal investment that President Biden has with Israel, and that historical connection that he has, and the fact that Vice President Harris's connection is not that strong, I do have concerns that if there is going to be a slight departure, that departure is going to be against Israel as opposed to in favor of Israel. The importance of the Trump meeting is obvious. The polls show that he's in a very strong position coming up to November, and he's had a pre-existing relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu before. Now, we'll all remember how close they were when they were in office together. There was some straining of the relationship during the past 3.5 years of the Biden administration for a few different issues. But ultimately, the fact that Trump will be meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu is a good sign. And let's not forget that one of the largest achievements in American foreign policy history, at least since the turn of the century, was the Abraham Accords. And that Abraham Accords brought a normalization and peace between Israel and a handful of Arab countries, namely Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Morocco, and Sudan. Now, we cannot underestimate the importance of such alliances, and I think that Netanyahu touched on this during his speech. The hope is that any presidency, whether or not that's President Harris or President Trump, will use the Abraham Accords as a foundation to what can grow in the region to create a much safer environment for what's going on there. An Israel-Arab alliance that takes the nefarious actors, namely Iran and the regime and its proxies, and make sure that united, they can all fight the struggle together. And there was evidence of that clearly on April the 14th, when Iran launched a barrage of cruise and ballistic missiles and attack drones into Israel. And they weren't just intercepted by Israel, the UK, and the United States. They were also intercepted with the assistance of Saudi Arabia and Jordan as well. So we're looking at a whole new potential for a regional stability agreement. And President Trump was able to do that with the Abraham Accords before. And the hope with Israel is that he'll be able to build on that in the future.
It's so important that we factor that in as we look at the US election. Benjamin Netanyahu has indicated that negotiations with Hamas may be improving over a potential hostage release and ceasefire deal. What's the latest?
So there's significant chatter over the past couple of weeks. There's been a lot of teams going here, there, from Israel to Doha, back to Cairo, and there's significant negotiations happening behind the scenes. My estimation is, and my hope is that we are itching closer to an agreement. There are a few very important sticking points. The patrol of the Egypt-Gaza border, where the majority of arms were smuggled, the ability of Israel to maintain security control and protection of its citizens, and also the amount of Palestinian prisoners who will be released in return for the Israeli hostages. So these are the things that are being ironed out now. There's no doubt within the Israeli politic there is a majority view that supports the hostage release deal. I will note that the Prime Minister works within a quirky system of government, which is unicameral and elected by proportional representation, which means that he has multiple coalition partners, which he has to balance and manage in terms of not just his agenda vis-a-vis the war, but his agenda overall. So whilst these moving parts keep moving, my hope is that there is progress towards it. The final thing that I'll say is that if President Biden is going to stay in power, which looks like he will until November, or until January, until the handover, it will be an important part of his legacy to get a win on the foreign policy stage. And if he is able to assist in getting a negotiated truce between Hamas and Israel for the release of the hostages, I think that he can consider that to be a bit of a win and to etch that into the end of his legacy as he's walking out the door.
While these negotiations are taking place, families in northern communities in Israel that were forced to evacuate because of the war have been told that they're not able to return to school in their hometowns when school gets underway in September. And that is the reality for tens of thousands of families, isn't it?
Gabriella, you raised such an important point, and unfortunately, this is one of the very important stories that is missed with all the fog of war that we've been reporting since October 7. And there is, since Hezbollah started its launch of rockets and drone attacks in the north on October 8, the day after Hamas launched its genocidal attack into southern Israel, about 75 to 90,000 residents of the north, a 5-kilometre buffer zone between Lebanon and Israel, have been evacuated from their homes. And they've been living in temporary accommodation in hotels ever since the 8th of October. So the news that they will not be able to, well, the school kids will not be able to return for the new school year that starts in September is very sad and very troubling. So there's a number of people that are displaced, and there's no view on the horizon as to when they can return. So the significant impact that it has on these people's lives, they've not only lost the ability to be in their homes, but the destruction in the towns in the north has been quite terrible. So some towns, at least 50% of the buildings have been damaged by the rocket fire, the daily rocket fire and the drone attacks coming from Hezbollah in the north. And essentially, and unfortunately, due to this conflict, certainly in the north, Israel is shrinking, and Israel has shrunk its territory by about 5 kilometers from today from October 8 until today. And that's obviously an untenable situation for Israel to maintain for the long term. So I think that it will impact the psyche of not just those residents who are displaced, but those in the whole country about the despair of the families unable to return. But it will exert certain pressures on the government to look to a different solution to the northern situation than they currently have on the table. And that could be either one of two things: either a diplomatic resolution with the assistance of the United States and others to get Hezbollah fighters to remove themselves from southern Lebanon and to retreat to the Litani River, which is part of a UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which ended the Second Lebanon War in 2006. Or the unfortunate other alternative is if a diplomatic avenue cannot be reached, then I do expect that the potential for a war in the north between Israel and Hezbollah is increasing in probability as the days go on.
It is just so heartbreaking to hear what the people of Israel are going through, and then seeing acts of anti-Semitism just displayed right around the world. Joel, Burnie, thank you so much for speaking to us here on Power Hour.
Thank you, Gabriella. Always a pleasure.